A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. The Weight of Forgetting. The dream always began the same way, running through a forest bathed in moonlight, her bare feet silent against moss-covered earth. She wasn't alone. Beside her, a massive wolf with fur the color of midnight moved with an elegance that stole her breath, but it was his eyes that held her captive, golden, luminous, and filled with something she couldn't name, something that felt like home. In the dream, she was laughing. The sound echoed through the trees, pure and unburdened. The wolf turned his great head toward her, and she could swear he was smiling. She reached out, fingers brushing through thick fur, and warmth flooded through her chest, a connection so profound it made her ache. Then, as always, she woke. Nessa Flynn gasped, lurching upright in her narrow bed. Her heart hammered against her ribs, the sensation of fur still tingling against her fingertips. For those precious seconds between sleep and waking, the dream felt real, more real than the small, sparse room she'd called home for as long as she could remember. She grabbed the worn notebook from her nightstand, hands trembling as she fumbled for the pen. Write it down before it fades. The words spilled onto the page in frantic scrawl. Golden eyes, running through moonlight. He feels safe. He feels like mine. But already, the details were slipping through her mind like water through cupped hands. What had they been doing? Where had they been going? The harder she tried to grasp the memories, the faster they dissolved. Within minutes, all that remained was a hollow ache in her chest, and the ghost of warmth against her palm. Nessa closed the notebook with shaking hands and pressed it against her heart. 20 years old, and she'd been having these dreams since she was old enough to remember. Dreams of the wolf with golden eyes. Dreams that left her gasping with longing for something she couldn't explain. The small alarm clock on her nightstand read 5:30 in the morning. Dawn was still an hour away, but sleep wouldn't return now. It never did after the dreams. Nessa pushed herself out of bed and padded to the bathroom, catching sight of her reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. Honey-colored eyes stared back at her, shadowed with exhaustion. Her light brown hair fell in tangled waves past her shoulders, and a constellation of faint freckles dusted the bridge of her nose. She looked tired. She always looked tired these days. By 6:30, Nessa had dressed in her usual work clothes, simple jeans and a faded gray shirt, and made her way down to the packhouse kitchens. The Crescent Hollow Pack territory sprawled across several acres of forest and residential buildings, but the main house served as the heart of their community. It was where Alpha Dorian Gray held court, where pack meetings occurred, and where Nessa spent most of her waking hours working in near-total isolation. The kitchen was already bustling when she arrived. 3 other pack members moved around the space, preparing breakfast for the higher-ranking wolves who would arrive within the hour. Nessa slipped between them like a shadow, reaching for an apron hanging by the door. "Morning," she said quietly to the woman chopping vegetables nearby. The woman didn't respond, didn't even glance up. Her eyes seemed to slide right past Nessa, unfocused and distant, as though she were looking at empty air. Nessa was used to it, had been used to it for 14 years. She moved to the industrial sink and began washing dishes left from the night before, working in the silence that always surrounded her. Around her, the other kitchen staff chatted and laughed, their voices creating a warm tapestry of sound that never quite included her. It had taken her years to understand that they weren't being cruel. They simply couldn't see her. Not really. Their eyes would skim over her presence as though she were furniture, something so unremarkable their minds refused to acknowledge it. If she stood directly in someone's path, they would step around her without conscious thought. If she spoke, the words seemed to dissipate before reaching their ears. She was a ghost among the living, present, but perpetually forgotten. The morning passed as it always did. Nessa worked steadily, cleaning and preparing ingredients, moving around the others who never once acknowledged her presence. By the time the sun had fully risen, breakfast had been served to the pack's senior members, and the kitchen staff had dispersed to their other duties. Nessa was wiping down the counters when the back door swung open, and Jade Rivers stepped inside. Jade was everything Nessa wasn't. Bright, vibrant, with warm brown skin and black curls that framed her face in a wild halo. At 19, she carried herself with a confidence that came from being seen, from being valued as a functioning member of the pack. She was also, inexplicably, the only person who seemed to remember that Nessa existed. "There you are," Jade said, her voice warm with relief. She crossed the kitchen and pulled Nessa into a quick hug. "I was worried you'd already left." "I'm here," Nessa said softly, returning the embrace. The physical contact always felt like a lifeline, proof that she was real, solid, present. Jade pulled back, her dark eyes searching Nessa's face with concern. "You look exhausted." "The dreams again?" Nessa nodded, managing a weak smile. "Same as always. I wake up feeling like I've lost something important, but I can't remember what. I wish I could help." Jade squeezed her hand. The touch was warm, grounding. "Did you write it down?" "What I could remember," which wasn't much. Nessa glanced around the empty kitchen, then lowered her voice even though no one else was present. "Sometimes I think I'm going crazy, Jade. The dreams feel so real, but then they just vanish. And everyone else here." She trailed off, the familiar ache settling in her chest. "Hey." Jade's grip tightened. "You're not crazy. I see you. I always have, even when I have to really concentrate to keep you in focus. There's something going on here, something bigger than either of us understands, but you're not imagining things." Nessa wanted to believe her, desperately, but 14 years of being invisible had taught her that hope was a dangerous thing. "Have you heard the news?" Jade asked, clearly trying to shift the conversation to safer ground. "The whole pack is buzzing about it." "About what?" "Alpha King Kalen Storm is coming here. To Crescent Hollow. He'll arrive in 3 days for a territorial inspection." The name sent an inexplicable shiver down Nessa's spine. Alpha King, the supreme authority over all North American packs. The wolf who commanded alphas the way alphas commanded their subordinates. She'd never seen him, of course. Wolves of her lowly status didn't attend formal pack functions. "Why would the Alpha King come here?" Nessa asked. Jade shrugged. "No one knows for sure. Dorian's been in a foul mood ever since he got the message. Apparently everyone in the pack has to present themselves for formal introduction. Every single member." Nessa's stomach twisted. "Including me?" "Technically, yes." Jade's expression turned sympathetic. "But Nessa, you know how these things go. Even if you stand right in front of him, he won't see me." The words came out flat, emotionless, just like everyone else. "I'm sorry." Nessa shook her head. "Don't be. I'm used to it." But as she spoke, her hand drifted unconsciously to the pocket of her jeans, where a small weight pressed against her thigh. She'd found it that morning while taking out the kitchen compost, a flash of silver half buried in the herb garden soil. A medallion, old and tarnished, hanging from a delicate chain. When she'd brushed away the dirt, she'd seen an ornate letter, K, engraved on its surface, along with the tiny figure of a wolf. The moment her fingers had touched the metal, something had happened. A flash of memory, brief but vivid. A small hand, her hand, pressing the medallion into the palm of a young boy with dark hair and tear-filled eyes. Her own voice, impossibly young. "I promise I'll save you." Then the vision had vanished, leaving her kneeling in the dirt with the medallion clutched in her fist, and no understanding of what she'd seen. "Nessa?" Jade's voice pulled her back to the present. "You okay? You zoned out for a second." "I'm fine." She forced a smile. "Just tired." Jade studied her for a moment longer, then nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but if you need anything, you know where to find me. Mom's got me working inventory in the storage rooms today, so I'll be around." After Jade left, Nessa finished her cleaning and slipped out of the kitchen through the back entrance. The pack house grounds were beautiful in the morning light, with ancient oak trees casting dappled shadows across manicured lawns. Pack members moved about their business, some in human form, others as wolves. None of them noticed her as she walked past. She found a quiet spot beneath one of the older trees and pulled out the medallion, studying it in the sunlight. The engraving was exquisite. The tiny wolf rendered in such detail she could almost see individual strands of fur. Something about it called to her. A pull she couldn't explain. That night, when sleep finally claimed her, the dream returned with a ferocity that left her breathless. She was running again, the golden-eyed wolf at her side. But this time, when she looked down at his neck, she saw something that made her heart stop. A collar, silver and gleaming, with a medallion hanging from it. A medallion identical to the one now hidden beneath her pillow. Chapter 2. When Golden Eyes Find Her. 3 days felt both endless and far too short. Nessa moved through them in a haze, her hand constantly drifting to the medallion she now wore hidden beneath her shirt. She'd cleaned it carefully, and the silver gleamed like moonlight against her skin. Wearing it felt right, in a way she couldn't explain, as though a missing piece had finally slotted into place. The pack house buzzed with frantic energy. Every surface was scrubbed until it shone. Every garden path swept clean of debris. Pack members practiced their formal greetings in hushed voices, nervous about making the right impression on the Alpha King. Even the air itself seemed charged with anticipation and barely concealed anxiety. Nessa watched it all from the shadows, as she always did. No one asked for her help with preparations. No one assigned her tasks or checked on her progress. She simply existed in the spaces between their awareness, a ghost haunting the periphery of pack life. On the morning of the Alpha King's arrival, Jade found her in the kitchen garden, ostensibly weeding but mostly lost in thought. "There you are." Jade dropped down beside her, breathing hard as though she'd been running. "I've been looking everywhere. The ceremony starts in an hour. You need to get cleaned up." Nessa pulled another weed, tossing it into the basket at her side. "What's the point? He won't see me any more than anyone else does. You don't know that." "Jade." Nessa turned to face her friend, managing a sad smile. "I appreciate the optimism, but we both know how this works. I'll stand there with everyone else, and his eyes will slide right past me. It's fine. I'm used to it." Jade's expression turned fierce. "Maybe things are different with him. He's the Alpha King, Nessa. He's more powerful than anyone we've ever met. Maybe that power means he can see through whatever is keeping you hidden." It was a lovely thought, a fantasy Nessa had entertained more than once over the past 3 days. But hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment, and she'd had enough of that to last a lifetime. Still, when Jade pulled her to her feet and dragged her toward the pack house, Nessa didn't resist. She let her friend lead her to a small bathroom, where Jade produced a dress from seemingly nowhere. "Where did you get that?" Nessa asked, eyeing the simple but elegant navy fabric. "I borrowed it. Well, stole it. From my cousin. She won't miss it." Jade thrust it into Nessa's hands. "Put it on, and for moon's sake, brush your hair." 20 minutes later, Nessa stood before the bathroom mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress fit surprisingly well, hugging her frame before flaring slightly at the waist. Her hair, freshly brushed and left loose, fell in soft waves past her shoulders. She looked almost normal, almost like someone who belonged. The medallion lay against her collarbone, visible above the dress's neckline. She'd tried to tuck it beneath the fabric, but it kept working its way free. Eventually, she'd given up, let it show. It wasn't as though anyone would notice. The ceremony was being held in the great hall at the heart of the pack house. By the time Nessa and Jade arrived, the space was already packed with wolves standing in careful rows according to rank. Alpha Dorian Gray stood at the front, flanked by his beta and senior pack members. Behind them, the rest of the pack waited in tense silence. Nessa slipped into the back row, wedging herself between 2 larger wolves who immediately shifted away, without seeming to realize why. Jade squeezed in beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "He'll be here any minute," Jade whispered. "I heard the cars pulling up outside." Nessa's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't understand her own nervousness. This ceremony meant nothing to her. The Alpha King meant nothing to her. He was just another wolf who wouldn't see her, wouldn't know she existed. She should have stayed in the kitchen where she belonged. But then the great doors swung open, and everything changed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as power flooded the space. It rolled through the hall in waves, making every wolf present instinctively bare their necks in submission. Even Dorian lowered his gaze, though the gesture clearly cost him. Alpha King Kalen Storm stepped through the doorway, and Nessa forgot how to breathe. He was devastating. There was no other word for it. Tall and broad-shouldered, He moved with a lethal grace that suggested violence held in perfect check. His black hair was slightly tousled, as though he'd been running his hands through it, and his features were sharp and aristocratic. Handsome in a way that seemed almost cruel, all harsh angles and firm lines, but it was his eyes that stole the breath from her lungs. Golden, luminous, burning with an intensity that made her knees weak. The eyes from her dreams. No, it couldn't be. That was impossible. The wolf in her dreams was just that, a dream, a fantasy conjured by her lonely mind during sleep. He wasn't real. He couldn't be real. Kalen strode into the hall with a dark-haired man at his side, his expression bored and distant. His gaze swept over the assembled pack with clinical disinterest, cataloging faces without really seeing them. He looked tired, Nessa thought distantly. Tired, and perhaps a bit frustrated, as though this entire ceremony was a waste of his valuable time. Dorian stepped forward, bowing low. "Alpha King, Crescent Hollow Pack is honored by your presence. We stand ready for your inspection." "Then let's make this quick." Kalen's voice was deep, resonant, with an edge of command that made every wolf in the room stand straighter. "Present your pack members." What followed was a tedious parade of introductions. Dorian called forward his senior wolves one by one, each bowing before the Alpha King, each receiving a brief nod of acknowledgement before being dismissed. Kalen looked progressively more impatient with each passing minute, his jaw tight and his golden eyes flat. Nessa watched from her position at the back, feeling that familiar hollowness settle in her chest. This was pointless. She should leave now, slip out before. Kalen's gaze swept across the back row, and stopped, for one impossible, suspended moment. His eyes locked directly onto hers. She felt the impact of that stare all the way to her bones, a jolt of recognition so profound it nearly sent her to her knees. His expression transformed from bored indifference to shocked intensity in the space of a heartbeat. He saw her. He was seeing her, not looking through her or past her, but directly at her, as though she were the only person in the entire hall. And then something else happened, something that made her gasp aloud, though the sound was lost in the general murmur of the crowd. A connection snapped into place between them, bright and burning and absolutely undeniable. It wrapped around her heart and pulled tight, a golden thread binding her to this stranger in a way that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "Mate," her wolf whispered the word with absolute certainty. "Mine." No, that wasn't possible. She couldn't have a mate. She was invisible, forgotten, a ghost among the living. Mates were for wolves who existed, who had families and futures and hope. Kalen took a step forward, his entire body oriented toward her. His lips parted as though to speak, and the intensity in his golden eyes made her want to run and throw herself into his arms in equal measure. "Who is she?" His voice cut through the hall like a blade. Silence fell. Dorian turned, following the Alpha King's gaze toward the back of the room. His eyes swept over the assembled wolves, his expression confused. "Who, Your Majesty? I don't—" "Her." Kalen pointed directly at Nessa, standing in the back row, with the brown hair and honey eyes. "Who is she?" Dorian's frown deepened. He stared right at Nessa, and his gaze slid away as it always did, unable to focus. "I'm sorry, Alpha King, but I don't see anyone matching that description. Perhaps you're mistaken." "I'm not mistaken." Kalen's voice hardened. He started walking toward her, and the crowd parted before him. She's standing right there. Navy dress, silver medallion around her neck. How do you not see her? The medallion. Nessa's hand flew to her throat, fingers closing around the warm metal. Kalen had noticed it. He'd noticed her wearing it. Their eyes met again across the shrinking distance, and the pull between them intensified until she could barely think through the roar of it. His scent reached her, pine and mountain air and something uniquely him, and her wolf surged forward, desperate to close the remaining space between them. But panic rose just as swiftly. This was wrong. This couldn't be happening. She wasn't meant to be seen, wasn't meant to exist beyond the shadows. And the mate bond, the terrible, beautiful certainty of it, was too much, too overwhelming, too real. When Kaylin was only 10 feet away, his hand already reaching toward her, Nessa broke. She turned and ran. Behind her, she heard shouts of confusion, heard Kaylin snarl orders to his guards. But the maddening thing about being invisible was that no one could track what they couldn't see. The guards looked for her, their eyes sweeping past her again and again as she ducked through the crowd and fled toward the side exit. She burst out of the pack house into the cooling afternoon air and kept running. Her feet carried her toward the forest, toward the trees where she'd always found her only peace. Branches caught at her dress and hair, but she didn't slow. She couldn't slow. If she stopped, she'd have to think about what had just happened, and thinking about it might break her entirely. She didn't know how long she ran. Time lost meaning as she crashed through undergrowth, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Finally, when her legs threatened to give out, she stumbled into a small clearing and collapsed against a tree trunk. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Nessa pressed her hands to her face, trying to process the impossible thing that had occurred. The Alpha King had seen her, truly seen her, when no one else could. And the mate bond, that sacred connection that every wolf dreamed of finding, had awakened between them with a force that left her reeling. Nessa. She jerked her head up. Kaylin stood at the edge of the clearing, chest heaving as though he'd been running. In the dying light, his golden eyes seemed to glow, fixed on her with an intensity that made her shiver. "Don't run," he said quietly, taking a slow step forward. "Please. I've been searching for you for so long." Chapter 3. Fragments of Truth. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of their breathing. Nessa's back pressed against rough bark, her pulse hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Kaylin stood several feet away, hands raised in a gesture of peace, his golden eyes never leaving her face. "How did you find me?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I followed your scent. Pine and wildflowers and something uniquely you." He took another careful step closer. "My guards couldn't track you, but I could. I'll always be able to find you, Nessa." The way he said her name made her shiver. Like it was sacred. Like she was sacred. "You shouldn't be here," she managed. "You should go back to the pack house. Forget you saw me." "Forget?" Kaylin's laugh was harsh, almost pained. "I've been dreaming about you since I was 12 years old. Do you understand what that means? 14 years of searching, of wondering if I was losing my mind. And then I walk into that hall, and there you are. Real, solid, mine. I'm not yours." But even as she said it, the mate bond pulsed between them, calling her a liar. Kaylin's jaw tightened. "The bond says otherwise. I felt it the moment our eyes met. You felt it too. Don't deny it." She couldn't. The connection was undeniable. A golden thread wrapped around her heart and pulling tight. But accepting it meant accepting that her entire lonely existence had been leading to this moment. And that was too much. Too overwhelming. "I need time," she said finally. "This is all happening too fast." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'm declaring a temporary residency in Crescent Hollow to investigate the anomaly preventing pack members from seeing you." His voice turned formal, official. "You'll stay in the guest quarters of the main house, under my protection. I don't need protection. Maybe not. But I need to know you're safe." Something vulnerable flickered across his face. "I've spent half my life searching for you. I can't lose you now." The raw honesty in his words cracked something inside her chest. She looked away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. "Dorian won't like you staying. Dorian can choke on his displeasure for all I care. I'm the Alpha King. He'll accommodate my wishes or face the consequences." There was steel beneath those words. A reminder that despite the gentleness he showed her, this man commanded every pack in North America. He could destroy Dorian with a single order. "Come," Kaylin said, extending his hand. "It's getting dark. Let me take you back." She stared at his outstretched palm, remembering the feel of fur beneath her fingers in her dreams. Slowly, heart pounding, she placed her hand in his. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm. Kaylin's fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. and she felt the bond flare brighter in response. He smiled, soft and wondering, as though she'd given him something precious. They walked back through the forest in silence. When they emerged near the pack house, Vaughn was waiting, his expression carefully neutral. "Your Majesty," the beta said with a slight bow. "Your quarters have been prepared. The Alpha has provided the east wing for your use." "Excellent. Nessa will have the room adjacent to mine." Vaughn's eyes slid past her, unable to focus. "I'm sorry, who?" Kaylin's grip on her hand tightened. "The woman standing right beside me, Vaughn. Try harder." The beta frowned, squinting as though looking through fog. For a moment, his gaze seemed to catch on her, and he blinked in confusion. "I think I see movement? Your Majesty, forgive me. But there's clearly something magical at work here. Obviously." Kaylin's tone was clipped. "Which is why we're going to get to the bottom of it. Have the records office opened. I want to see every birth certificate, every pack registry from the last 25 years. Of course, Your Majesty." The guest quarters were far nicer than anywhere Nessa had ever slept. The room Kaylin led her to held a large bed with soft linens, a writing desk by the window, and a private bathroom. It felt like a dream. Or a trap. "Rest," Kaylin said from the doorway. "I'll have food brought up. Tomorrow we start looking for answers." But sleep didn't come easily. Nessa lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Everything had changed in the span of hours. She'd been seen, acknowledged, claimed by the most powerful wolf in North America. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. She opened the door to find Jade standing in the hallway, eyes wide with shock. "Oh my God." Jade pushed past her into the room and grabbed her shoulders. "Nessa, what the hell happened? The entire pack is talking about how the Alpha King went crazy during the ceremony, claiming to see someone invisible. And then you disappeared. And he disappeared. And now he's declared he's staying indefinitely and you're under his protection? It's complicated. Uncomplicate it. Now." Nessa sank onto the bed, and the whole story spilled out. The dreams, the medallion, the moment their eyes met and the bond snapped into place. Jade listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, wonder, and fierce protectiveness. "He's your mate," Jade said finally. "The Alpha King is your mate, and he can see you when no one else can. That's... Nessa, that's huge. That's fate, or a curse." Nessa pulled her knees to her chest. "What if he figures out why I'm invisible and decides I'm too much trouble? What if whatever is wrong with me is something he can't fix? Then he'd be an idiot. And from what I saw, he doesn't look at you like you're trouble. He looks at you like you're the answer to every question he's ever had." Before Nessa could respond, another knock sounded. This time, Kaylin entered carrying a tray loaded with food. His eyes landed on Jade, and he frowned. "Who are you?" "Jade Rivers, Your Majesty. Nessa's friend." Jade straightened, meeting his gaze with more courage than most wolves showed around an Alpha King. "The only person besides you who can consistently see her." Interest sparked in Kaylin's golden eyes. "Interesting. That's not normal, is it?" "Nothing about this situation is normal," Jade muttered. Kaylin set the tray on the desk, then turned to study Jade with the same intensity he'd focused on Nessa earlier. "You said you can consistently see her. Define consistently." "I have to concentrate. It's like looking through water. If I focus hard enough, she comes into view. But the moment my attention slips, she fades into the background again." "And you've always been able to do this?" Jade nodded. "Since we were kids. I thought everyone could see her at first. It took me years to realize I was the only one." Kaylin's expression turned thoughtful. "That suggests you have some resistance to whatever magic is affecting her. We'll need to explore that further." Over the next 3 days, Nessa fell into a strange new routine. Her mornings were spent with Kaylin in his temporary office, where they pored over his collection of notebooks. 14 years of dreams, meticulously recorded in his sharp, angular handwriting. The first time he read one of her dream entries aloud, something incredible happened. His voice wrapped around the words, and suddenly she remembered. Not just the vague emotions, but actual details. The way moonlight had filtered through tree branches. The sound of his laugh. the feeling of absolute safety when he ran beside her. "You were telling me about the stars," she whispered, eyes closed. "You said they were wolf spirits watching over us." Kaylin's breath caught. "You remember that." "Only for a moment. It's already fading." She opened her eyes, finding his face close to hers across the desk. "Why does it work when you read them?" "Why can I remember?" "I don't know. But we're going to figure it out." In the afternoons, Vaughn brought them findings from his investigation. Pack records showed no trace of Nessa Flynn. No birth certificate, no school enrollment, no medical records. It was as though she'd been erased from official existence. But he'd found something else. Records showing that Garrett Flynn, the pack's current carpenter, had served as Beta 14 years ago. That Alpha Dorian Gray had been promoted from Beta to Alpha following the mysterious death of the previous Alpha. "There's more," Vaughn said on the third evening, his expression grim. "I found references to a royal consort named Tobias, who served the old Alpha King around that time. He vanished without explanation shortly before King Reardon's death. No one seems to know what happened to him." Kaylin's jaw tightened. "You think there's a connection?" "I think it's suspicious that multiple significant changes happened 14 years ago, right around the time Nessa would have turned 6. That night, Nessa's dreams turned dark. She saw herself as a child, small and terrified, kneeling before a figure made of silver light, the moon goddess. Some instinct whispered. A boy lay nearby, pale and still, poison eating through his veins. "Please," the child Nessa sobbed. "Save him. I'll do anything. Anything." The goddess's voice echoed like bells. "Then I offer you a bargain, little one. His life for your existence. He will live and thrive. You will be forgotten by all save in dreams. Do you accept?" "Yes. Yes, just save him." The scene shifted. The boy opened his eyes, golden and alive, but when he looked at her, his gaze was already sliding away, unable to focus. Nessa woke screaming. Within seconds, her door crashed open. Kaylin burst through, barefoot and shirtless, his eyes wild with panic. "Nessa, I did something terrible," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "When I was 6, I did something terrible." He was on the bed in an instant, pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, sobbing as fragments of memory crashed over her. A boy, dying. A goddess offering hope. A choice that had stolen her entire existence. "Tell me," Kaylin murmured against her hair. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." And surrounded by his warmth, his strength, his absolute certainty, Nessa finally began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face anything alone ever again. Chapter 4. The Pact Revealed. The ancient witch lived on the very edge of Crescent Hollow territory. In a cottage so weathered and overgrown it seemed to emerge from the forest itself. Kaylin insisted on driving, with Nessa in the passenger seat and Jade squeezed into the back. The journey took them down increasingly narrow roads until they were forced to abandon the vehicle and continue on foot. "Are you sure about this?" Jade asked, eyeing the twisted trees that seemed to lean inward over the path. "This feels like the beginning of every horror story ever told. Meredith is ancient and powerful, but she's not dangerous," Kaylin said. His hand found Nessa's, fingers intertwining. "At least not to those who approach with respect." The cottage appeared suddenly, as though it had been hiding behind a veil. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney, and herbs hung drying from every available surface. Before they could knock, the door swung open. The woman who stood there was impossibly old, her face a map of wrinkles, her hair a wild silver cloud around her head. But her eyes were sharp and clear, burning with an intelligence that made Nessa want to look away. "Alpha King," Meredith said, her voice surprisingly strong. "You've brought me something interesting." Those ancient eyes fixed on Nessa, and the witch's expression shifted to one of recognition. Oh, I see. The moon goddess's bargain. I wondered if it would ever come to fruition. You know what happened to her?" Kaylin stepped forward, his voice tight with urgency. "Come inside. This is not a story to be told on doorsteps." Meredith turned, disappearing into the cottage's dim interior. The space inside was larger than it had any right to be. filled with books and bottles and strange artifacts that seemed to hum with power. Meredith gestured them toward a worn sofa, while she settled into an armchair that had probably been old when she was young. 14 years ago, the witch began without preamble. A great evil moved through the royal court. A consort named Tobias, ambitious and cruel, plotted to murder the entire Alpha King bloodline. He planned to seize power in the chaos that would follow. Kaylin's jaw tightened. I remember Tobias. He was always hovering around my father. He poisoned you, Meredith said bluntly. You were 6 years old, and he gave you wolfsbane mixed with silver dust. A death sentence, even for a child of royal blood. Your father's best beta, Garrett Flynn, was loyal and knew nothing of the plot. But Dorian Gray, then merely an ambitious subordinate, carried out Tobias's orders. Nessa felt ice slide down her spine. My father's name is Garrett Flynn. Yes, child. You were his daughter. His only daughter. Best friend to the young prince who lay dying in the forest where you'd been playing. Meredith's gaze softened. You found him convulsing, foam at his mouth, skin turning gray. A 6-year-old child watching her best friend die. The memory crashed over Nessa with brutal clarity. Kaylin, small and terrified, his golden eyes dimming. Her own screams for help that went unanswered. The desperate, bone-deep certainty that she would do anything, sacrifice anything, to save him. I called for the moon goddess, Nessa whispered. The memory was returning in fragments, sharp and painful. I begged her to save him. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Why would she offer such a cruel bargain? Jade demanded, her hands clenched into fists. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Kaylin's hand tightened around Nessa's. She's been alone for 14 years because of me. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Nessa touched the medallion, warm against her skin. I buried mine. I couldn't bear wearing something no one else would remember. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Jade approached hesitantly. The witch reached out, her gnarled fingers hovering just above Jade's forehead. Interesting. You have witch blood. Distant, diluted, but present. That's why you could partially resist the curse. Magic recognizes magic even when the bearer doesn't know what she carries. Jade stumbled backward, eyes wide. I'm a witch? Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. There's something else, Kaylin said. Why hasn't anyone tried to harm her? If she's been invisible for 14 years, she would have been vulnerable. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Her 21st birthday, Kaylin said slowly. When is it? 3 weeks, Nessa whispered. The cottage fell silent. The implications hung heavy in the air. After Nessa turned 21, the protection would expire. Dorian could eliminate her without fear of exposure. We need to break the curse before then, Kaylin said, his voice hard with determination. How? Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Outside, the afternoon sun seemed too bright after the cottage's dimness. Nessa stood on the forest path, trying to process everything she'd learned. She'd saved Kaylin's life. They'd been childhood friends. The dreams were fragments of real memories, not fantasies. Nessa. Kaylin turned her to face him, his golden eyes intense. A 6-year-old girl sacrificed everything to save me. You gave up your family, your identity, your entire existence, for me. I couldn't let you die. The words came out choked. Even now, knowing what it cost, I'd make the same choice. Something broke in his expression. He pulled her against him. one hand cradling her head, the other wrapped around her waist. "You're the bravest person I've ever met, and I swear to you, I will break this curse. I will give you back everything you lost." She looked up at him, and the space between them seemed to contract. His gaze dropped to her mouth and she stopped breathing. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the gentle brush of lips she'd imagined. It was desperate, claiming, a promise sealed in heat and hunger. She responded with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, 14 years of loneliness igniting into something fierce and bright. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jade cleared her throat from several feet away. "So, I'm going to pretend I didn't just watch the Alpha King make out with my best friend while discovering I'm apparently a witch. Cool? Cool." They drove back in charged silence, Kaylin's hand never leaving Nessa's thigh. But as they approached the pack house, Vaughn was waiting, his expression grim. "Your Majesty, we have a problem. I've been monitoring Dorian's communications. He's been in contact with wolves from the Eastern Territories, the same region where Tobias had allies before he vanished." Kaylin's expression hardened. "He knows we're getting close to the truth. There's more. You're required at an emergency council meeting tomorrow in the capital. It's mandatory for all Alpha Kings. You'll need to leave tonight." Which meant leaving Nessa vulnerable. Kaylin's hand tightened on hers, and she could feel his reluctance through their bond. "Go," she said quietly. "I'll be safe here. Jade and Vaughn will look after me." But even as she said it, unease prickled down her spine. Somewhere in the pack house, Dorian Gray was planning his next move, and time was running out. Chapter 5. When Darkness Descends. Kaylin left at dawn, his departure feeling like a physical wound. Nessa stood at the window of her guest room, watching his black SUV disappear down the long driveway, and tried to ignore the anxious flutter in her chest. 3 days. He'd be gone for 3 days while she remained here, vulnerable and increasingly visible to the one person who most wanted her dead. "Stop brooding," Jade said from the doorway. "Vaughn has guards posted at every entrance. Dorian won't try anything with the Alpha King's beta watching his every move." "You don't know that." Nessa turned away from the window. "We discovered his secret. He knows time is running out. Desperate men do desperate things." Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. The packhouse library was a dusty, forgotten space that clearly hadn't been used in years. Perfect for 2 women who wanted privacy. They settled into worn armchairs with stacks of ancient texts, searching for anything that might help. Hours passed. The afternoon sun slanted through grimy windows, painting everything in shades of gold. Nessa was deep in a particularly dense volume on moon goddess mythology when Jade suddenly gasped. "Nessa, look at this." Jade thrust a book toward her, finger pointing to a passage. "It's about magical anchors. It says witch blood can create protective bonds with cursed individuals, allowing the witch to partially share the curse's burden. That's why I could always see you. I wasn't just resistant to the curse, I was unconsciously helping you carry it." Before Nessa could respond, the library door opened. Both women looked up, expecting Vaughn. Instead, 3 men stepped inside. Large, unfamiliar, their eyes cold and flat. Rogues. Nessa recognized the wildness in their scent, the lack of pack bonds that marked wolves who'd been exiled or abandoned. Well, the largest one said, his gaze sliding past Nessa before landing on Jade. "Only one? Thought there were supposed to be 2. Jade stood slowly, placing herself between the rogues and Nessa. "You're not authorized to be in here. Leave now, or I call for guards. Guards are busy. Convenient fire in the West Wing." The rogue smiled, revealing too many teeth. "Now, the girl. Alpha Dorian says there's a girl in here who shouldn't be. Hand her over." "I don't know what you're talking about." The rogue's patience snapped. He lunged forward, and Jade reacted on instinct. Power exploded from her palms in an uncontrolled burst, shoving him backward. But she was untrained, raw, and the other 2 rogues were already moving. One grabbed Jade from behind, while the other produced a syringe filled with murky liquid. "Witch blood," he sneered. Magic suppressor. Should keep you nice and quiet. Nessa acted without thinking. She grabbed a heavy bookend from a nearby shelf and swung it at the rogue holding Jade. The impact sent him stumbling, but it also drew attention. For a moment, the lead rogue's eyes found her, actually focused on her. "There you are," he breathed. Then everything happened too fast. More syringes, the sharp sting of needles, Jade crying out as the suppressor magic flooded her system. Nessa fighting with everything she had, but 3 trained warriors against 1 invisible Omega was never going to be a fair fight. The world tilted. Her limbs turned heavy. Through blurring vision, she saw them lift Jade's unconscious form, felt rough hands grab her own shoulders. "Dorian's going to be pleased," someone said, voice distant and warped. Both of them. Nice and tidy. Then darkness swallowed her whole. She woke to cold, the kind that seeped into bones and made teeth chatter. Nessa's head pounded, her mouth dry as dust. Slowly, awareness returned. Stone floor beneath her, damp walls around her, the smell of mold and decay. "Nessa?" Jade's voice, weak and frightened. "Are you awake?" "Yeah." Nessa forced her eyes open, squinting against dim light filtering through a high, barred window. They were in some kind of cellar or basement, ancient and abandoned. Jade sat against the opposite wall, her hands bound with iron chains that glowed faintly with suppressor runes. "Where are we? Old Miller warehouse, maybe. It's been abandoned for years." Jade tested her bonds, wincing. "These chains are spelled. Every time I try to access my magic, they shock me." Before Nessa could respond, heavy footsteps echoed from above. A door opened, and 3 figures descended a narrow staircase. The rogues from before, and behind them, Alpha Dorian Gray himself. In the dim light, his expression was cold, calculating. He looked at Nessa, and unlike every other time they'd been in the same room, his gaze didn't slide away. He saw her clearly. "Finally," Dorian said. "Do you know how frustrating it's been, knowing you existed but unable to properly focus on you? The curse made you invisible to everyone except that damned Alpha King. But here, in this warded space, with the right magical assistance, I can see you perfectly. Why are you doing this?" Nessa's voice came out stronger than she felt. "Because you're a threat. You always have been." Dorian crouched down, bringing himself to eye level. "I followed orders 14 years ago. Tobias wanted the young prince dead, and I was ambitious enough to carry out the poisoning. But then you interfered, made your little bargain with the moon goddess. Saved him. You tried to kill a 6-year-old child. I tried to seize an opportunity." Dorian's expression didn't change. "Tobias died shortly after, killed in battle with rival packs. I thought I was safe. I became alpha of this territory, built a comfortable life, and then you showed up, invisible and forgotten, a constant reminder of my crime. The protection clause had kept her untouchable until 21, a ticking mercy almost out of time. Smart girl. But you turned 21 in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and then I can make your death look like an accident. No one will remember you existed. No one will investigate." He stood, brushing dust from his pants. "Unfortunately, the Alpha King complicated things by finding you. So, we're accelerating the timeline." Jade thrashed against her chains. "Kalen will tear you apart when he finds out. The Alpha King is in the capital, attending mandatory council meetings. By the time he returns, both of you will be dead, and I'll have ensured it looks like rogue wolves were responsible. Tragic, really. 2 young women caught in the wrong place at the wrong time." Terror clawed at Nessa's throat, but beneath it, something else stirred. Anger. Fury at this man who'd tried to murder an innocent child, who'd let her suffer in invisibility for 14 years to protect his own secrets. And with that fury came something new. Heat, building in her chest. Power, rising like a tide. Memories crashed over her, sudden and vivid. The moon goddess's voice. "You will forget, child, but the gift remains. When you need it most, you will remember what you are. Guardian, protector, bearer of my gift." Nessa's eyes snapped open, and for the first time in 14 years, she remembered everything. Every moment of her childhood with Kalen. Every word of the goddess's bargain. And most importantly, the power she'd been given, the ability to manipulate perception, to bend memory, to make others see what she willed them to see. Dorian was still talking, outlining his plans to the rogues. He didn't notice when Nessa's bonds began to glow with soft silver light, didn't see the way her eyes turned luminous, reflecting power that had been dormant for too long. But Jade saw, and Jade understood. At that moment, far away in the capital, Kalen Storm stood in a council chamber and felt his mate bond flare with sudden desperate alarm. Nessa, his Nessa, was in danger. He didn't hesitate. He tore down the old royal route, relay SUVs leapfrogging the stretches no wolf could cross, and never once let the bond's iron pull slip from his lungs. Didn't make excuses. He simply transformed mid-stride, his massive black wolf form exploding through the chamber doors as lesser alphas dove out of his path. His beta's voice called after him, but Kalen was already running, following the golden thread of his bond back toward Crescent Hollow. Hold on, he thought, pouring every ounce of love and determination down their connection. I'm coming. Chapter 6. The Goddess's Choice. The warehouse exploded in chaos. Nessa's power surged outward in a wave of silver light, and the rogues stumbled backward, their eyes glazing with confusion. She focused her will on them, bending their perceptions, making them forget why they'd come, who had hired them, what they were supposed to do. What are we doing here? One of them muttered, looking around the decrepit space with bewilderment. Dorian's face contorted with fury. No, you idiots, grab her. But it was too late. The rogues, their memories scrambled by Nessa's newly awakened power, simply turned and walked up the stairs, leaving the warehouse entirely. Dorian lunged for Nessa, desperation making him reckless. But Jade acted. Despite the suppressor chains, she managed to channel enough raw magic to create a barrier of shimmering energy between them. Stay away from her, Jade snarled, blood trickling from her nose from the effort. Before Dorian could respond, the warehouse door above them crashed open. Massive paws thundered down the stairs, and then Kalen was there in his wolf form, black as midnight, eyes blazing gold with protective fury. Behind him came Vaughn and a dozen royal guards. Kalen didn't hesitate. He launched himself at Dorian, teeth bared, and the alpha barely managed to shift before those jaws closed around his throat. They collided in a tangle of fur and fangs, rolling across the stone floor. Dorian fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, but Kalen was the Alpha King for a reason. Stronger, faster, more skilled. Within moments, he had Dorian pinned, teeth at his throat in a killing position. Kalen, wait! Nessa's voice cut through the bloodlust. Don't kill him. He needs to face justice. The massive black wolf turned his head toward her, golden eyes meeting honey-colored ones. For a moment, she saw the internal struggle, the desire to end the threat permanently, but then he released Dorian's throat, though his weight remained pinning the traitor down. Guards rushed forward, producing silver chains that would neutralize any wolf's ability to shift or fight. They bound Dorian securely while Vaughn freed both Nessa and Jade from their restraints. The moment Kalen shifted back to human form, he was pulling Nessa into his arms, his hands running over her frantically, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? I felt your fear through the bond and I ran. I've never run so fast in my life. I'm okay, she whispered against his chest, breathing in his scent of pine and mountain air. We're both okay. Jade saved me, and I remembered Kalen. I remembered everything. He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. Everything? The goddess gave me power, the ability to manipulate perception and memory. It was dormant all these years, but when I needed it most, it awakened. She smiled through tears. I'm not helpless anymore. You were never helpless, he said fiercely. You survived 14 years invisible and alone. That takes more strength than any power. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. What? Why? Kalen kept one arm around Nessa protectively. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Meredith's account rang the bell twice. Once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. The moonlight intensified, becoming solid, taking shape. The figure that materialized was both beautiful and terrible, her form shifting between woman and wolf, between solid and ethereal. Power radiated from her in waves that made even Kaelin drop to one knee. "Rise, Alpha King," the goddess said, her voice like silver bells. "You've come far since that frightened child dying in the forest." Kaelin stood, though he kept his head bowed respectfully. "Moon goddess, I seek to break the curse binding my mate. She's suffered long enough. Has she?" The goddess circled them slowly. "Tell me, King. Why should I release her from our bargain? Because she was 6 years old when she made it. A child who didn't understand what she was giving up. She understood perfectly. She chose your life over her existence. That choice was pure, selfless, beautiful." The goddess stopped in front of Nessa. "And you, child, do you regret your choice?" Nessa met those ancient eyes without flinching. "No. I'd make it again, but I'd like a chance to live now if you'll grant it." "Interesting." The goddess turned back to Kaelin. "I set conditions for breaking this curse. You had to find her organically and love her truly, not just from gratitude or forced bonds. Have you fulfilled those conditions?" "Yes." Kaelin's voice was certain. "I dreamed of her for 14 years, searched for her across territories. And when I found her, I fell in love with who she is. The brave, kind woman who survived isolation without becoming bitter. Pretty words, but I require proof." The goddess's form solidified, becoming more imposing. "I offer you a choice, Alpha King. You may have Nessa freed from the curse, restored to full existence, remembered by all. But to do so, you must abdicate your throne. Give up your power, your authority over all packs. Walk away from everything that defines you." The clearing fell silent. Nessa's breath caught. "No, that's too much. Don't ask him to give up." "The choice is his," the goddess interrupted. Kaelin stared at the divine figure, his jaw tight. Nessa could feel his internal struggle through their bond. The throne wasn't just power. It was responsibility he'd carried since 18. It was his father's legacy, his purpose, his identity. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked quietly. "Now. Choose this moment. Your throne or her freedom." Nessa gripped his hand. "Choose the throne. I can live with the curse if it means you can continue protecting the packs. Your duty is more important than—" "No." Kaelin turned to face her fully, his golden eyes burning with intensity. "Nothing is more important than you. Not power, not legacy, not duty." He looked back at the goddess. "I choose Nessa. Take the throne. I'll gladly be nothing but a common wolf if it means she's free." But he didn't say it rashly. There was a pause, a moment where he genuinely weighed the cost. The packs who relied on him. The stability he provided. Vaughn who served him loyally. All of it measured against the woman before him. And still, he chose her. The moon goddess smiled, and it was radiant. "There, that is what I needed to see. Not blind devotion, but conscious choice. You considered the weight of your responsibilities and still chose love." She reached out, touching both their foreheads. "The curse is broken. The bargain fulfilled. You have both proven worthy." "Wait." Kaelin's eyes widened. "You're not taking the throne?" "The test was never about taking your throne, foolish king. It was about whether you'd sacrifice it. Love without sacrifice is merely infatuation. You've proven yours is real." The goddess's form began to fade. Nessa Flynn is released. She will be remembered, seen, acknowledged. The magic that bound her dissolves now. The change was immediate. Nessa gasped as something fundamental shifted inside her. Like shackles she'd worn so long she'd forgotten their weight suddenly snapping open. Through the bond, she felt Kaelin's overwhelming relief and joy. "One more gift," the goddess said, her voice growing distant. "The power I gave you, Nessa, is yours to keep." Use it wisely. Protect those who need protection. And remember, both of you, love that survives sacrifice is love that endures forever. Then she was gone, the moonlight returning to normal. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Jade whispered, "Did that really just happen?" Vaughn approached the circle cautiously. "Your Majesty? Nessa?" He blinked, and his eyes focused clearly on her for the first time. "I can see you. Properly see you." Nessa laughed, the sound breaking into a sob. "It worked. The curse is broken." Kaelin pulled her into his arms, and they sank to their knees together, holding each other as 14 years of loneliness and searching finally came to an end. Chapter 7. Reclaiming what was lost. The drive back to Crescent Hollow Pack felt surreal. Nessa sat in the passenger seat of Kaelin's SUV, watching the familiar landscape pass by. And for the first time in 14 years, she didn't feel like a ghost observing from the outside. She felt real, present, seen. Vaughn drove while Kaelin kept one hand firmly intertwined with hers, as though afraid she might vanish if he let go. In the back seat, Jade dozed, exhausted from the magical suppression and subsequent rescue. Dorian, bound in silver chains that burned against his skin, rode in a separate vehicle with royal guards. "What happens when we get back?" Nessa asked quietly. Kaelin's thumb traced circles on her palm. "The curse breaking will have rippled through reality. People will start remembering you gradually, as though waking from a dream. It won't be instant for everyone, but it's already begun. My parents." Her voice caught. "They're going to remember they had a daughter they forgot for 14 years. They'll remember you saved my life. That matters. But would it be enough? Could any parent forgive themselves for forgetting their child, even under magical compulsion?" They reached the pack house as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The moment they pulled up, the front door burst open and two figures rushed out. A man with graying brown hair and a woman with honey-colored eyes so like Nessa's own. Garrett and Elena Flynn stumbled to a halt when they saw her emerging from the vehicle. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. Garrett stood frozen, his expression caught between joy and devastation. "Nessa!" Elena's voice broke on the name. "Oh gods, Nessa. My baby, my daughter, I forgot. How could I forget my own daughter?" Nessa's own tears spilled over as her mother collapsed to her knees on the gravel driveway. She ran forward, dropping beside her, and Elena pulled her into a desperate embrace. "I'm sorry." Elena sobbed into her hair. "I'm so sorry. 14 years. We lost 14 years with you. It wasn't your fault." Nessa held her mother tighter. "The curse made everyone forget. You couldn't fight it." Garrett joined them, his large hands trembling as he touched Nessa's face, as though confirming she was real. "You were 6 years old. We put you to bed one night, and the next morning, we woke up and couldn't remember. Couldn't remember we had a daughter." His voice cracked. "I was Beta when the prince was poisoned. I should have protected you both better. You didn't know about Dorian's betrayal," Kaelin said, stepping forward. His presence commanded immediate respect, and Garrett straightened instinctively. The guilt belongs to him alone. The pack house doors opened again, and more people began emerging. Pack members drawn by the commotion, their expressions confused and distressed, as fragmented memories returned. A teenage boy who'd been in Nessa's childhood classes, an elderly woman who'd taught her to bake bread, a Beta who remembered training her father alongside a small girl with bright eyes. They all stared at her with growing horror and shame as they realized what had been taken from them. Over the next hours, chaos reigned. Pack members approached Nessa tentatively, apologizing for not seeing her, not remembering her. Some cried. Others stood silent, processing the magnitude of what the curse had done. Through it all, Kaelin remained a steady presence at her side, his hand never leaving hers. As midnight approached, he led her to the pack's sacred ground, a clearing deep in the forest where the full moon hung overhead like a silver coin. The entire pack gathered, forming a circle around them. Jade stood at the front, her face still showing signs of exhaustion, but her eyes bright with fierce pride for her friend. Tonight, Kalen's voice carried through the clearing with the weight of his authority. I claim Nessa Flynn as my mate and future queen of all packs. Does anyone challenge this right? Silence. Then, from the back, an older alpha stepped forward. One of Dorian's allies, his expression dubious. Your Majesty, with respect, she's an Omega. Cursed. Is she truly suitable to be queen? Before Kalen could respond, Nessa spoke. I was cursed because I chose to save a dying child rather than watch him suffer. I've survived 14 years invisible, forgotten, but never broken. I have power given by the moon goddess herself to protect those who need protecting. She met the alpha's eyes steadily. If that makes me unsuitable in your eyes, then perhaps you should question what qualities you value in your leaders. The alpha's jaw worked, but he had no response. Around the clearing, murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Kalen's hand found the small of her back, proud and possessive. Nessa will be trained in her gifts. She'll serve as guardian of shadows, protecting vulnerable pack members from magical threats. Any alpha who cannot accept this can take it up with me personally. No one else spoke up. The bonding ceremony was ancient and sacred. Meredith performed the ritual, her voice carrying centuries of wisdom as she blessed their union. Kalen and Nessa stood face to face under the moon's light, their hands clasped, their eyes locked. Do you, Kalen Storm, Alpha King of all territories, take this woman as your mate, your Luna, your equal? I do. His golden eyes blazed with intensity. In this life, and every life that follows. Do you, Nessa Flynn, daughter of Garrett and Elena, take this man as your mate, your alpha, your equal? I do. Her voice was strong, certain. Forever. Kalen reached into his pocket and withdrew the silver medallion, cleaned and polished until it gleamed. This was yours first. You gave it to me when we were children. A promise of friendship. Now I return it to you as a promise of forever. He fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin. The medallion settled against her collarbone, warm and right. Then came the claiming bite. Kalen's eyes flashed gold as he leaned down, his lips brushing the junction of her neck and shoulder. When his teeth sank in, marking her as his, pain and pleasure exploded through her in equal measure. The mate bond, already present, blazed to full strength, connecting them so completely she could feel his heartbeat, as though it were her own. He pulled back, and she saw her blood on his lips before he kissed her, deep and claiming. When they broke apart, the pack erupted in howls of celebration. The next day, Dorian Gray's trial was held in the Great Hall. Every alpha from surrounding territories attended, along with the pack's senior members. Dorian stood in chains, his expression bitter but resigned. Meredith's account rang the bell twice, once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. Alpha Dorian Gray, Kalen's voice was ice. You attempted to murder me when I was 6 years old. You followed orders from a traitor and poisoned the heir to the throne. How do you plead? Guilty. Dorian's laugh was hollow. I was ambitious and stupid. Tobias promised me power, and I believed him. When he died, I thought I'd escaped consequences. But you lived, and she remembered. And my crimes caught up with me eventually. The sentence for attempted regicide is death, Kalen said. Nessa stepped forward. I ask for a different sentence. Exile. Permanent exile from all territories, stripped of pack bonds, forbidden from ever holding rank again. Let him live as a rogue, alone, with nothing but his guilt for company. Death would be mercy. Let him live knowing what he lost. Kalen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Exile it is, effective immediately. Guards removed Dorian from the hall. He didn't fight, didn't protest. He simply left, and with him went the last shadow of Nessa's cursed past. That night, in Kalen's private chambers, Nessa stood at the window overlooking Packlands. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned into his warmth. Are you all right? He murmured against her hair. I keep expecting to wake up and find this was all a dream. That I'm still invisible. Still forgotten. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. "Look at me. Really look." His golden eyes held hers with absolute certainty. "I see you, Nessa. I will always see you. Every morning for the rest of our lives, I'm going to wake up and make sure you know you exist. You matter. You're mine." She kissed him then, pouring 14 years of loneliness and longing into it. When they moved to the bed, it was with the certainty of forever, the promise of always, and the knowledge that no curse, no darkness, could ever separate them again. Chapter 8. Where Dreams Become Reality. 6 months had passed since the curse broke, and Nessa still woke each morning, surprised to find herself real, remembered, and wrapped in Kaylin's arms. Today was no different. Golden sunlight streamed through the windows of their shared chambers in the royal palace, painting everything in warm, amber tones. Kaylin stirred beside her, his eyes opening to reveal molten gold. The first thing he did every morning without fail was reach for her hand and press it to his chest, over his heart. "You're here," he murmured. The ritual they'd established in those early days when her disbelief had been strongest. "You're real. You're mine." "I'm here," she confirmed, smiling. Every morning, forever, they rose together, Nessa dressing in the elegant but practical clothing befitting a future queen. She'd refused the elaborate gowns some advisors suggested, preferring garments that allowed her to move freely. Today's schedule was packed with meetings, training sessions, and the official opening of a new initiative she'd spent months developing. The Sanctuary Program, as it was officially called, provided safe housing and resources for marginalized Omegas across all territories. Nessa had worked with Jade to create magical protections around each sanctuary location, ensuring no vulnerable wolf would ever be invisible or forgotten again. "Nervous?" Kaylin asked as they walked hand in hand toward the council chamber. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if the other alphas don't support it? What if they think I'm overstepping?" He stopped, turning her to face him. "Then they'll answer to me. You're not overstepping. You're leading. There's a difference." The council chamber was already full when they arrived. Alphas from every territory sat around the massive circular table, their expressions ranging from supportive to skeptical. But they all stood when Nessa entered, a sign of respect that still made her heart skip. Jade stood near the back of the room, her witch's robes marking her new position as royal court witch. She'd trained extensively with Meredith over the past months, learning to control and harness her natural gifts. When she caught Nessa's eye, she offered an encouraging smile. "Lords and ladies," Kaylin began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Today marks the official ratification of the Omega Protection Act, proposed by my mate and your future queen, Nessa Storm." The formal use of her new surname still sent a thrill through her. Storm. She was a storm now, bound to Kaylin in every way that mattered. Nessa stood, her hands steady despite her nerves. "For 14 years, I experienced what it means to be invisible, forgotten, powerless. While my circumstances were magical, many Omegas face similar isolation through societal neglect. This act ensures that every Omega, regardless of pack status or family connections, has access to resources, education, and protection." An older alpha from the Western Territories raised his hand. "With respect, Lady Nessa, some might see this as undermining pack authority. Alphas should be responsible for their own Omegas, and yet many aren't," Nessa replied evenly. "I'm not undermining anyone. I'm creating a safety net for those who fall through the cracks. Surely we can agree that protecting our most vulnerable members strengthens all packs, not just individual territories." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Another alpha, one who'd been vocally supportive from the beginning, spoke up. "I've reviewed the proposal extensively. It's well designed and funded through royal coffers, placing no burden on individual packs. I move to ratify." "Seconded," came a voice from across the table. The vote was called. One by one, alphas raised their hands in support. When the count was finished, the act had passed with an overwhelming majority. Kaylin's pride flooded through their bond, warm and golden. The Omega Protection Act is now law across all territories. Well done, my queen. Meredith's account rang the bell twice, once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. "From the moon goddess herself," the witch said, handing it to Nessa. "She wanted you to have this." Nessa's hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. The letter was written in script that seemed to shift and change as she read, as though the words were alive. "Nessa Flynn, now Storm," it began. "You were chosen long before you ever knew to choose. The boy dying in the forest was not random chance. I guided you to him, tested you both through circumstances designed to reveal your true natures. A child willing to sacrifice everything for another, a king willing to surrender his throne for love. You have both proven worthy of the gifts I bestowed. Your power is not curse, but blessing. Use it wisely, protect those who need protecting, and remember that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in ruling, but in choosing to serve others before yourself. Walk in moonlight and shadow both, guardian and queen." Tears blurred Nessa's vision. It was all planned, from the very beginning. Meredith's account rang the bell twice, once as history, once as sentence. No one asked her to repeat the terms. The room already felt smaller beneath their weight. That evening, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Kaylin and Nessa drove out to the forest clearing where she'd found the medallion all those months ago. They'd visited this spot several times, but today felt different, more final somehow. A true closing of one chapter and beginning of another. They stood together where Nessa had knelt in the dirt, unearthing a promise from 14 years past. Kaylin held a small wooden box containing both medallions now, the matching set she'd commissioned a silversmith to create, one he wore always around his neck, one she wore against her heart. "We should bury the notebooks," Nessa said suddenly. "All those years of dreams and fragmentary memories. We don't need them anymore." Kaylin studied her face. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. We're living the reality now. The dreams served their purpose." They dug a small hole together and placed the box inside, along with the worn notebooks they'd both kept for so many years. Beside the burial spot, they planted a young oak sapling, its roots taking hold in the same soil that had hidden the medallion. "For the girl who stopped existing," Kaylin said softly, his hand finding hers. "And the boy who never stopped searching," Nessa finished. The next morning brought the formal investiture ceremony. Nessa stood before the assembled court, wearing a gown of silver and midnight blue that reminded everyone of the moon goddess's blessing. Kaylin placed a crown of twisted silver and moonstones on her head, the weight, both literal and symbolic. "I present to you Queen Nessa Storm, guardian of shadows, protector of the forgotten, and Luna of all territories." The court erupted in howls of approval. The ancient way wolves showed respect and acceptance. Jade's voice rose among them, fierce and proud. Later, in the throne room for their first official joint council, Nessa sat beside Kaylin in a throne of equal size, equal height, equal importance. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. This was a partnership, not a hierarchy. Their first decree as joint rulers was simple but powerful. No Omega will be forgotten. No wolf will be invisible. Every member of every pack has value, and that value will be recognized and protected by law. That night, alone in their chambers, exhaustion and triumph mingled in equal measure. Nessa stood at the window, looking out over the palace grounds, still marveling at how far she'd come from that ghost in the packhouse kitchen. Kaylin's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "About dreams," she said softly. "I used to dream of a wolf with golden eyes who made me feel safe, and now I wake up every day with him beside me. It's better than any dream ever was. We still dream of each other," he reminded her, "but now we dream of the future instead of the past. I dreamed last night that we had a daughter with your eyes and my stubbornness." She laughed, turning in his arms. "That poor child. She'll be perfect, just like her mother." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I spent 14 years searching for you, Nessa. And I'd search for 14 more, 1,400 more, if that's what it took. You're worth every moment. You won't have to search anymore." she whispered against his mouth. I'm right here. Always. They moved to the bed, their connection deeper than physical, the mate bond singing between them with certainty and joy. When they finally lay entwined, sated and peaceful, Nessa felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. Do you think you'll dream tonight? She asked drowsily. Probably. Kaylin's hand traced lazy patterns on her back. I dream of you every night, my love, but the best part isn't the dreaming. It's waking up and finding you still here, still mine, still real. Every morning, she promised, her eyes drifting closed. Forever, as sleep claimed them both. The moon rose outside their window, full and bright, blessing them with silver light. And in that light, two souls who'd been separated by curse and reunited by choice, dreamed together of all the tomorrows waiting to be lived.